people.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, everyone. We're just waiting for a couple of other people to join us online. We'll just give it a couple more minutes.
Okay, maybe we could get started, Sarah.
Okay, sure. There is a few more people still coming. Okay, no worries. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I am the Strategic Advocacy Lead in the Research, Evaluation and Advocacy team. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the first people of the various lands of which we're gathering today. For myself, that's at home on Gubbi Gubbi country or Cubbi Cubbi country. Our corporate office is located on the Turrbal and Yagara people's lands. And I would just like to thank them for their care of country and their spiritual connection to land, sky, and water. I'd like to pay respect to these elders past and present, as well as any First Nations people that are joining us today, and respectfully recognise that sovereignty has never been ceded. Just a little bit of housekeeping to get us started today. Please use the chat function for questions if you have any. We do have time allocated for questions after each presentation today, and we will have a little bit of time at the end, hopefully, as well. This webinar is being recorded, so just bear that in mind, obviously, with your cameras on and your backgrounds and all the things happening. So just a bit of context for you guys. This is our first research forum for 2025 in a series facilitated by Anglicare's Research, Evaluation and Advocacy team. Online today, we have our manager, Leanne Wood, Manager of Research, Evaluation and Advocacy. Most of you will know her. And Anna Stevenson, who is our Senior Advisor, Researcher and Evaluation. If Anna could just give a wave. Thank you. The aim of the forums is to showcase the findings of our ASQ research partners, as well as Anglicare's own research projects, and we hold them about 3 or 4 times a year on various topics and projects. So today's webinar, the first presentation focuses on a discussion around bystander intervention and the role it plays in domestic and family violence. And our second presentation will highlight research from Anglicare's Living Without Violence Behaviour Change Program for Men. So we're going to get straight into it today because we're only here for an hour, so we're not mucking around. So introducing our first speakers today is Dr. Ella Kuskov from the University of Queensland and Professor Cameron Parcell. Ella is a Senior Research Fellow at the ARC Centre of Excellence of Children and Families over the Life Course. Her research seeks to understand the experiences of people experiencing deep and persistent disadvantage, including those who are subject to domestic and family violence and those who experience poverty and homelessness. Cameron's work examines multiple forms of exclusion and social harms. His research focuses on the nature and experience of poverty, homelessness, and domestic and family violence. And I'll hand over to these guys to share their presentation with you this morning.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I'll just get our presentation up. Does that work? Yes, we can see it. Very good. All right. So thank you so much for having us here today to talk about bystander intervention in domestic and family violence. Oh gosh, how do we make that? There we go. All right. So we were going to start with some introduction, but I think Sarah has beautifully covered that in more depth than we were going to. So we might get straight into the interesting stuff. Now, how many of us have heard the phrase that domestic and family violence is everyone's responsibility? Now, I can't see hands, but I assume it's at least a few of us, because I think society is really starting to connect to this idea that friends, family members, neighbours, co-workers, strangers. We all have a responsibility to, I guess, first of all, recognise that if and when domestic and family violence is happening, but also to, you know, step in and do something about it when something is happening. And this, I think, is quite an intuitive idea, right? Because we, you know, no one likes to think of someone experiencing domestic violence. We certainly don't want to just sit back and let it happen. So, you know, as good citizens, we want to step in and do something to help. So I guess intuitively, this is a really good thing to be doing on the one hand, but on the other hand, it does come with, I think, a lot of complexity that we don't often think about or engage with in the way that perhaps would be useful.
And it's part of a progressive movement, isn't it? Rather than seeing domestic violence as something hidden in the home that women should endure, it's understanding that it should be something that's spoken about in society, but it's also something that we can't entangle from the cultural norms within society and our responsibilities to think about these personal problems as social issues. So there's a lot to be optimistic about, but there's a massive but.
Yes, and so yes, our program of research is really focused on trying to unpack these complexities and build, I guess, a really good evidence base for how we can kind of go about this in the best and safest and most effective ways. So where we started was that we were really keen to understand, okay, what are society's expectations for bystanders to intervene in domestic and family violence? So to kind of get at this, we did a scoping review of government policies related to domestic and family violence, as well as community organisations, kind of resources and guidelines for bystanders on how to intervene. And so we kind of systematically collected these policies and resources across 8 different English-speaking countries to get a bit of, I guess, more of a global view. And what we found in this analysis was that there really was, I guess, strong expectations, a lot of ethical and moral kind of responsibility messages for, you know, as a bystander, it's your responsibility to step in and help. You know, domestic violence is everyone's business. Be a proactive bystander, be an active bystander, be an upstander, kind of get involved and help put a stop to it is very much the messaging. But when it comes to, I guess, the guidelines and the resources, there was a lot of ambiguity around what's the best way to go about this, and a lot of, I guess, conflicting information. Some people say, you know, this is one really great way to do it, and then other resources would say, well, actually, absolutely don't do it that way.
Well, I was just going to, it wasn't almost just an activity. It was almost a way. It was framed in terms of this is what constitutes a good citizen.
Yeah.
You know, this is how to live well. This is not just something that you do as an add-on, but this is the absence of intervening is evidence of both a failed society, but also a kind of an immoral individual. So it's kind of that powerful, and often the magnitude of the violence and the threats of death was provoked as kind of, you need to intervene because the stakes are so high. You know, it's a compelling argument.
Yeah, absolutely.
Except for the but. In terms of what does intervening actually look like and mean?
Yeah, and so I think drawing from that, I guess, ambiguity around, well, what actually should people be doing? Our then next step was like, well, what is the evidence, right? What do we know about what actually happens when bystanders intervene, and what the outcomes are? What does a good intervention look like according to the evidence? So our next step was to do a systematic review of, we focused on academic literature across the last 20 years, and we looked globally. We really wanted to find out what are people's experiences of bystander intervention in domestic and family violence, as well as, in particular, we were really interested in what are the outcomes, what actually happens for the victim survivor. Is it a positive outcome? Is it useful? Is it safe? And so in the last 20 years across the whole world, we found 3 papers that talked about the outcomes from the perspective of victim survivors. There were a few more from the perspective of bystanders, which we found was an interesting dynamic. But yeah, so really, really limited evidence there was heaps of stuff around how do we get people to intervene more, how do we remove barriers to intervention, but really limited consideration of, well, is what we're asking people to do actually useful?
And this is important because you've drawn this out, Ella, in terms of some of the evidence in the broader bystander literature is about intervening in public space when there's violence among strangers. And there's some evidence that works. But you've been able to identify the dynamics of an intimate partner relationship, which mean intervening, being a bystander, is very, very different. The stakes are different from a bystander intervention among two strangers in public.
And particularly, we know the context of domestic violence, right? It's not a one-off incident. It's, often ongoing pattern of behavior, right? So it's like perhaps a bystander intervention might stop this particular incident, but we know, the victim survivor has to keep living with him, continues to share children with him, has their lives are entwined. So it's not as simple as stopping this particular intervention solves the problem. So then that kind of led us to our current project, which is still in process. So we're still doing interviews. So what we present today is a very preliminary kind of sample of our analysis. But what we're really trying to do is build that evidence base about experiences and outcomes of bystander intervention in domestic and family violence, particularly prioritising the experiences and perspectives of the victim survivors, but also, listening to the expertise of domestic family violence service providers, as well as the experiences of bystanders who have intervened. And the quotes we kind of go through today are focused primarily on the victim survivors' experiences. So the first very key theme coming out of the interviews is that, while most of the victim survivors are kind of saying, yes, there's absolutely a role for bystander intervention, and, bystanders have played a critical role in my own story, we do need to be very careful because there are a lot of risks involved, and much of the discussion has kind of centered around when the risks increase, the victim survivors then kind of take that risk on board. They feel responsible then for the bystander's safety. So as you can see from this first quote, if you're running into my burning building, now I've got to worry about you as well as everything else in my burning building. So really just, adding another thing onto the plate of the survivor who's already, I guess, dealing with a lot and trying to keep often her and her children safe. We also found a really interesting dynamic whereby some people were kind of talking about, I'm so scared that a bystander will take it upon themselves to intervene and make things worse that I actually don't want to tell any of my friends or disclose what I'm experiencing, just in case someone does come in to try and help and end up making things worse. So I think that's a really, important thing to consider.
It's just so powerful what's been found here, and it's almost a triple burden, isn't it? It's the victim survivor has to protect themselves, the emotional labour involved, and then also you found that they need to think about managing the emotions of the perpetrator to try and minimise risk. But now the bystander, there's a third stakeholder. They need to think about, how can I manage their interests and keep them safe? So that, the penalty for surviving violence is the extra burden that the women are enduring.
And now another key finding, and this one we were actually explicitly asking our participants about confronting the perpetrator, because this was one of the findings from our scoping review on expectations of bystander intervention, where a lot of the community resources were kind of at odds. Some would say, absolutely, you need to confront the perpetrator, hold them to account, they need to know what they're doing is wrong. But then you had others that kind of said, it's way too high risk, never do that. So we thought, let's ask. And again, there's always different perspectives, but the clear kind of overarching, agreement. So this idea that standing up and calling the perpetrator out directly was seen to be as quite a high risk approach. You know, again, this first quote, if any of my friends had stood up to him directly, I'd have really panicked because I'd have known what was coming for me afterwards. So again, this idea, maybe it might help in the moment, but then what happens once they get home? Yeah, and I think what else was really interesting was, even though these survivors were kind of saying, like in my case, absolutely that would have made things worse, there was also this really clear need. They were saying, you know, having said that, we do need to find a way to hold perpetrators to account, right? And if no one tells them what they're doing is wrong, then they know they can get away with it and they're going to keep doing it. So I think there's really interesting tension between, well, how do we hold perpetrators to account and kind of send those signals without, like, in a way that's still safe for the victim survivor.
And this really, what you found about the victim survivor seeing their risks exacerbated is in tension with how we portray things in the media. When a bystander does intervene, they're unanimously represented as the hero, right? So there's a lot of social pressure that, you know, we should intervene because that's the heroic thing to do. But you know, you're really finding that, you know, that might be seen as heroic, but it might have detrimental consequences to the victim survivor.
And the last finding that we're going to talk about today is, it's really a question that, you know, every time I kind of talk about, this is my research, the first question people ask me is, well, then what do I do? What is a good bystander intervention? And it's a really hard question to answer because there is so much complexity. Every situation is different. Every survivor's preferences are different. So without kind of knowing the context, it is really hard to know what to do. So I think the message that we are getting is, don't kind of take it upon yourself. I think someone said, don't come in with your cape on. Don't kind of take it upon yourself to come in and kind of make these decisions and try and fix things. But rather, like, don't do anything without first talking to the victim survivor about what they need and what they want. Yeah, making sure, there was a lot of talk about making sure that you are a safe person and you create a safe space so that when someone does need help, they know they can reach out to you and you will, you're a safe person for them to come to, rather than kind of stepping in and making that decision for them. Like, no, I'm going to be your person. This is what I'm going to do, type thing. So just really, yes, foregrounding victim survivor and their needs and what they identify.
And the nuance with which you analyse this data is so impressive, because it's often assumed that because the victim survivor is in need of protection, we kind of assume that they're in need of protection, so we need to make the decision. But really what we're finding is that, yes, a victim survivor needs protection, but they also have the capacity to determine what that protection should look like. So it's about trusting them and valuing their sense making and their risk assessments and doing what is best for them as determined by them. Yeah,
Absolutely. And so just to, I guess, sum up, really, I think we perhaps naively came into this research hoping for a bit of a pattern and to get a bit of idea of, you know, what's going to be most useful in what circumstances. But I think so far what we're finding is just, you know, how complex these things are, and I don't think there is a pattern or a right answer to any of this. So it's really, I think, really foregrounding, I think, the difficult position that bystanders are in, knowing that they have this responsibility to intervene, wanting to help, but really not having the context or the background or kind of knowing all the information that they need to be able to make these, I guess, safe and effective decisions. As I mentioned, this research is still in progress. We are still interviewing. So if anyone here is keen to share their own experiences about bystander intervention, please do get in touch, because we'd love to hear you and include your experiences in the research. Any final remarks? No.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ella and Cameron. Excuse me. I thought it was really interesting, actually, that you mentioned that there's a third stakeholder in this situation. You know, there's the perpetrator and the victim survivor, but then that bystander becomes that third stakeholder, and the level of empathy, I suppose, that sometimes the victim perpetrator can feel to not want them to be caught up in it, and now they're worried about that person as well. Yeah, it's another complexity, I suppose.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really, really
Yeah.
tricky, I think, for everyone involved to know how to navigate that and what is needed. Yeah, it's tricky.
And that
Yeah.
trickiness is never kind of apparent when we talk about everyone's responsibility. When we say that, we kind of all nod because we think, yeah, that's a reasonable proposition. And we still think it is. But our research is suggesting that we need more complexity around what constitutes everyone's responsibility. And that complexity needs to be informed by and driven by the victim survivor analysis of what needs to happen. So yes, it's everyone's responsibility, but it's a more complicated responsibility in terms of what we do to prevent domestic and family violence.
Yeah. Did anybody else? Oh, Leanne. Anyone else have any questions?
Sorry, thank you so much, Ella and Cameron. Like, I think that it raised a whole lot of issues for me around the complexity, and it just kind of raised a conversation I had recently with an acquaintance who had heard a situation developing over his back fence, and so he put his cape on and he leapt over the fence, and he intervened. I wondered what you would tell him in that circumstance. Like, it's a neighbour, he doesn't know the neighbour, but he's hearing it happening as as he's at the back fence, and I totally get the complexity of that situation, but I wondered, what your advice might be to him if he hears it again.
Yeah, it is really tricky. I think the sense that we're getting is that if you feel like there's an immediate risk to safety, call the police, but otherwise find a way to maybe connect with the victim survivor later when she's alone or something. Try and check in, see if they're okay. Again, just kind of creating that safe space, checking and getting if they're probably not gonna, the second a neighbor comes over and says, "Are you okay?" They're not gonna, talk about their entire, everything that's going wrong in their life. But but again, check, like, making that safe space, saying hi over the fence, just being a person that they feel like, right, if things ever go downhill, I can run next door and this person is gonna be like that sort of thing is probably but it's hard.
I don't want to get all romantic this morning, Leanne, but it kind of this problem in part comes from being disconnected from our neighbours, being disconnected from any sense of a village or a community. In the old and romantic days, perhaps we all knew each other and could reach out and be conscious of each other and caring for each other, whereas now there's much more alienation among our neighbours and this kind of reluctance to even know them or be able to connect with them. And so maybe what we need is the more romantic version of the village where we're living in interdependent communities, at least where we can, openly contact and be in connection with each other.
Thank you.
Thanks. Did anybody else have any other questions or comments that they wanted to make on the presentation before we move along? Can't see any raised hands.
Sorry, I just wanted to say I'm really sad I missed most of your presentation. I was so excited to hear your research. And I was technical issues. So I was just wondering, so the victim survivors that you were interviewing, were they currently in the situation, or had they come out of it? And
really good question. So far, mostly they've been out of it for a couple years at least, most of them, but there have been a small handful who have only just very, very recently. We're still connected to all the support service, and it's still a very, very kind of recent thing, but none who have still been with the violent partner. That makes sense. So and I think when we get a bit deeper into the analysis, it will be really interesting to kind of look at different stages in the journey and where it's reflecting back what we think was helpful and what wasn't. I think would be really, really interesting.
Yeah, because I would imagine that if there's some significant distance between your relationship with the perpetrator or something like that, and you know, having had people intervene in the relationship all the time and police may be coming and all of this other stuff, that perhaps in hindsight, they might have perceived that that was helpful.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point and something
Mm,
we're looking at once we have all the data. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Because I can really clearly picture that, you know, if you're in the heat of the moment and he's escalating because there's intervention, you know, the victim survivor would be at very much more great risk. So, yeah.
And particularly you don't know the outcome, right? Whereas if you're a
Yeah.
post, you know how things turned out in the end. Whereas when you're in it, you have no idea if that's going to be a good long-term intervention or not. So yeah, really,
Yeah.
real complex stuff.
Yeah, it's a really interesting research question. You've explored there. I think that I can't wait to read some about it. I don't know whether your presentation will be available later.
Yeah, of course. This has been recorded, so we will have the recording published afterwards as well. I'm just not sure, Anna, if there's a bit of feedback.
Is that from us?
It could be from you guys. Just a
Might be Anna.
it might be from you, Anna, but
Okay.
Are you using your?
You know what? I am in Citrix, and it was the only thing IT could organize for me. Right.
All right. We shall persist.
So I think if there's feedback and there's, you know, a phrase and stuff like that, that's the reason. And I couldn't get a decent background. I'm sorry.
We'll move along to our second presentation this morning, and I'll just introduce Anna. So Anna is a registered psychologist and service lead for domestic and family violence across counselling services in Anglicare. She has been involved in management of the Living Without Violence behaviour change program for men since 2010, and with advocacy and counselling services to child and adult victim survivors since 2001. Given Anna's long-term passion for progress and outcome evaluation in the pursuit of optimum outcomes for clients and their families, data collection and continuous improvement have been part of the day-to-day operations for over 20 years. I'll hand over to you, Anna. It's a little bit echoey, but I'll mute, and maybe if Leanne mutes, that might help as well. We'll see how we go.
Can you still hear me now?
Yeah, there's just some feedback.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Sometimes it happens when people are wearing their headphones.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it sounds okay to me, but you know, as an echo, I don't know what's happening there. I will just see if I can find my presentation now because it got knocked off while IT was working with me. So I'll just find it and then I'll share. Okay, let me see. Okay. So you can see all of that? And you can hear me? Can I just verify that you can hear what I'm saying? Or...
Yes, we can hear.
Oh, you can. Oh, great. Excellent. Okay. So I will kick off. Yeah, so I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are, the land on which we live, walk, and work, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and recognize that sovereignty has never been ceded. It is and always will be Aboriginal land. So just a quick overview. I'll give you a little bit of a service profile and history of the Living Without Violence program, and then talk to the intervention program and client journey, and then go through the data collection, progress and outcome, victim survivor voices, and some participant feedback. So, the Living Without Violence program commenced in approximately 1990. So we've been in the men's behavior change program space for a really long time. At that time when it first started, it wasn't funded. And so it was, they just internally funded it. And it was Anglicare Connection service that set that up initially. And then, you know, some years later, we got some Queensland state funding to run just 2 programs. So over the years, the program has increased from being, you know, a short program of 20 hours to now being 45 hours since 2018. And while victim survivor advocacy, because it was always done internally from the early days, it was always incorporated, and we were delivering services for victim survivors and their children in our connection service in the 90s. So it was not until 2010 that we had established a memorandum of understanding with Centacare for them to deliver advocacy to the victim survivors of persons using violence who were attending our 2 closed programs. So that occurred until we got service expansion funding that kicked in 2017. And that allowed us to change our service model to bring advocacy back into the program. And the service model was such that we had victim survivors advocacy delivered by female men's behavior change program facilitators. So we had two locations where groups were being delivered. So the female facilitators in one location were supporting the victim survivors of men in group in the other location. So there was not that conflict of interest, but it was a really, you know, on a positive side, it was really rich for the facilitators to have the victim survivors' voice really present in the work all the time. But by the same token, you know, they had limited availability, and also it became quite stressful to hold both of those roles. So we were very relieved that, you know, in later on we got some, and this was just in 2024 really, we got funding to have a dedicated victim survivor advocate / counsellor involved in our Living Without Violence program. So she works full time and supports all of the victim survivors of all the 12 groups that we now run since 2020. So we also have 4 days of court support to respondents in the Brisbane Domestic and Family Violence Specialist Court. And we've had a presence since 2017, but it was just 1 day. So that was that expansion when the Brisbane Specialist Court was set up. That increased to 4 days. So he is there supporting all of the respondents that are coming through there. And yeah, so that's the so the victim survivor advocate that we have on board now has the capacity to support victim survivors 6 months post the POV exiting the program. And we find that that's really important, because when men leave a program and they have to kind of go out on their own and try to implement strategies that they've learned, there's huge capacity for relapsing to past behaviors. So we just expect that there will be an escalation in risk once they exit. So we have also just had some exciting funding that we have received to implement a brief intervention trial for persons choosing violence who are diverted into a short 8-week program under the coercive control and affirmative consent legislation that comes into effect in May of 2025. So the program, we're really just developing it at this point in time, and it will be has to be up and running and seeing clients on the 1st of May. So we're busy. So the Living Without Violence intervention program, in 2018, we purchased the Disrupting Family Violence and Moving Closer to Family Wellbeing program that was developed by Hall McMaster and Associates. And it was just hot off the press. We got it while they were still developing it. So it was really great, because Ken McMaster was then able to support us in implementing the program. And the way it was designed, it was really just lending itself well to an open group format. So having continuous intakes over time, which has certainly helped us a lot with our wait list for program services. The theories underpinning this program is based on feminist theory. There's risk, needs, and responsivity angle to it, which is also, so it's really been evaluated with offenders in a correctional setting. There's CBT and acceptance and commitment theory in there, as well as social learning theories and trans-theoretical model, so motivational intervene strategies that are really incorporated into it. So the program runs over 18 sessions and over 2.5 hours per session. So it's 45 hours in total while in group. And we run the 2 groups at Stafford. There's a daytime group and an evening group, and 2 groups at 8 Mile Plains, also a daytime and an evening group. So that's that. So the intervention program content covers 5 topics. Ken refers to them as missions. So the first one is an introductory session that really kind of just invites people to understand the CBT model, so beliefs affecting the way we think, which in turn affects how we feel and then how we act, and how that sometimes the behavior of our responses can reinforce what we already believe. So we can create this cycle of negative thinking, right? So the second mission or topic is about thinking and beliefs. So heading is thinking like a family man. So it covers all the different types of focus. So that you really focus on beliefs in one and how we interpret things. The third mission is around emotions and family well-being. So it's about managing your emotional responses and the impacts on family members and partners and children and so forth. And, and really understanding, how your interpretations really affect how you're going to respond and how quickly you might respond without thinking. So it's working to develop some skills around, understanding your emotional responses and intervening in them earlier, seeing warning signs before it's too late. Mission 4 is around meaningful relationships and the impacts on other people. So, and that can also include impacts on themselves, on community, on family members, on society as a whole. And you know, the relationships section also talks about communication, sexual respect, and so forth. And then mission 5 is how I affect others. And that's really, really focused strongly on parenting and domestic violence being a parenting choice. So we, you know, really work on, you know, developing some positive parenting strategies and that kind of stuff in that. So that's the content of that. So
Anna, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Anna. I just wondered if you could minimize this meeting preview that's on the screen.
Oh, minimize the screen.
Yeah, if you just minimize that because it's blocking a bit of your slides as you're presenting.
Oh. Why do I do that?
Just that. Just over on the right of the slide, and yeah, just the little straight line should minimize it.
Just can't see it.
Just where the timer is running down on the meeting. Yep, right there. Yep.
Oh,
perfect.
I see. Okay, I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. I was waiting for a breath to just sort of jump in, but as you were, carry on.
Okay, I'm just going to take you back to the program structure. So, when the client is referred into the program, they undertake an intake interview on the phone with our intake team. So, and then, you know, they're added to our Living Without Violence waitlist. So once that's happened, information is then sought from courts and police under the Part 5A provisions under Domestic and Family Violence Protection Act. So once that's received, that information, the intake team can complete a common risk and safety framework level 2 risk assessment tool, and that might result in a fast tracking of a client to the group or to an assessment of suitability. So once they are in the assessment of suitability, it's 2 hours, 2 times 1.5 hours. And at that time, we collect some baseline measures that informs, you know, the internal evaluation. So once that's done, they've attended those 2 sessions, they are allocated to an intro group. So the intro groups are the first 2 sessions of mission 1. And they run 2 weeks every month. So 2 weeks apart in alternating locations. So that means that when men are allocated they've done their intro session, it runs concurrently with the last 2 sessions of every mission. So the other missions being 4 sessions long, you know, as soon as they've completed the intro, they can go into an open group. So we allocate, if we can get 16 guys into an intro group, we can allocate 4 men to each group every mission. So every 4 weeks. So that we've found works really well, and it's actually, there's some positivity in having new men join men who are more experienced, and it just sets the scene for more disclosure and more safety. So also, once they're involved in the program, we have a one-on-one mid-group review sessions at approximately session 9 or 10, and that's where our midpoint measures are collected. And then once they've completed the 18-session group, you know, they attend another one-on-one post-group exit and safety and relapse prevention planning session. And the post-group measures are then collected there. So from go to woe, it's approximately 22 to 26 weeks program involvement. And we've had to, because there's limited availability for individual sessions, if participants miss a session, they're then required to return to the group when the session is offered again, either in their existing group or other groups in the same location. So they can technically attend in the other location, but, you know, travel might preclude them from doing that. But it also means that, if they have a lot of catch-ups to do, they can end up being involved for a really long time. So, so it's not a bad thing to have longer involvement, because it allows them to cement some of those changes over time. And so progress and outcome evaluation was really implemented in 2010. So the initial selection of our measures, the precondition was that they had to be clinically meaningful. It had to be something that the counsellors could engage with, that was leading them to maybe make a referral or support the client in a particular way. So we were looking at dynamic risk factors, especially those that were seen to influence the severity of domestic and family violence or control that was used in the relationship. So things like alcohol and drug use and dependence were key factors to look at, as well as mental health concerns. We knew that housing stress, homelessness, was also a factor that would impact whether somebody had a sense of wanting to take revenge and things like that. So often when there were, and there very often is no contact conditions on a DVO, which means that men are ousted from the home and immediately they leave court. They have nowhere to go. So that is an escalation point. And it's like, you could interpret that as a forced separation. And we know that separation is a very high risk factor. So we also know that men traditionally have limited or no support networks. So that's another thing that makes them more vulnerable and probably more attached to their partner, ex-partner. Consistent parenting stresses. So if there's, family court involvement, or they have to have shared parenting arrangements, that is a massive stress factor for them as well. And then personality factors, also influence. It is that we don't do assessments of personality disorder in our program, but we may get that information through other sources. So, these tools are very much meant as screening tools as well, referrals, and for monitoring progress and so forth. And also some of these dynamic risk factors may actually equal unsuitability, because we can say if people have really unchecked dependency on a substance, then they need a treatment program or a rehabilitation center or something like that prior to getting enrolled in the group. It's a great risk for other men who have had substance use issues, and puts them at risk of relapse if we have other men who are actively participating in the program. So when we initially started, we didn't have risk assessments like the Common Risk and Safety Framework at that time. So in 2010, we incorporated the Spousal Assault Risk Assessment Guide, and that was really asking us to collate corroborating information from different sources to be able to calculate a danger score, basically, of future violence. So that was a really key part early on to use that. And then the Common Risk and Safety Framework Level 2 risk assessments were incorporated in 2017 when that document was released. And also we were participating in the Level 2 Adults Using Violence Risk Assessment pilot. So that is specifically focusing on persons using violence, as opposed to the other Level 2, which really focuses on risk to the victim survivor. So at the same time as the Common Risk and Safety Framework had information sharing guidelines that were embedded in the Domestic and Family Violence Protection Act, and the Part 5A provision enables corroborating information then to be obtained to inform our work with the clients. And so when I was saying before that our intake team obtain information from courts and police under Part 5A, that's what they're doing. So that means we have maybe a police protection notice on file, and we've got court information on file that can assist a thorough assessment of the risk of that person. And we also then collect a lot of demographic profile information. For example, how many children were in the family, and so we could expect that there would be exposure to domestic and family violence for those children. Age of participants, employment, referral sources, whether there's an integrated service response in place, and also, their marital status, and lots of different demographic and profile information. So mental health and alcohol and other drug use, we are using the Depression, Anxiety and Stress Scale, short form, the 21-item form, as well as the PsychCheck self-reporting questionnaire, which really relates to whether or not people have symptoms of, depression and anxiety and other mental health symptoms that are existing outside of their substance use. And then we utilize the ASSIST, which is an alcohol and drug measure that's really comprehensive, addressing all types of different substances. We collect information, to inform family well-being progress. So we use the Family Problem-Solving Communication Index to track improvements in communication, so affirmative versus inflammatory communication, and then abusive behaviors with the abusive behavior inventory. So client satisfaction is also collected. We use a validated client satisfaction questionnaire tool, and it has quantitative and qualitative components there. So all of our data is then entered in the SPSS statistical program for analysis, and we do that on a regular basis. We analyze our data every quarter for reporting purposes. And, so victim survivor voices are also really important. We're key to obtain, of course. So we have used the abusive behavior inventory with victim survivors, but have found that it's a bit intrusive for them, but so we're exploring other avenues, which I will talk to a bit later. But their safety is incredibly important to track. We also required to collect the quality of life on the WHO quality of life brief form. And, we also collect qualitative reports of changes to safety and what they have observed from men attending, or their partners or ex-partners attending the program. So the data cohort I've looked at, there's a cohort of 156 men who were active during the 23-24 financial year, and we've included just the last, the last year as well, up to March, in the March, in fact. So there have been 60 men who have been active in this last period, and 89 men who completed during the period prior. So, I've said here, so 61% have provided feedback somewhere along the way here. We had nearly 60% of the men who were engaged for 22 or more sessions prior to completing the program. So when I'm saying 89 men have completed, they have exited the program, in fact. So, and 77%, so 75 have literally completed the program with the exit interview as well.
Anna,
because yeah.
Anna, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to let you know that we're nearly at time for today's webinar.
Okay. I'll hurry.
It's already 25
So I will.
10.
So now I've got lots to talk about. Okay. So yeah, so there you can see that there's lots of children involved here. So 87% of POVs were the biological father of 311 kids. So you can see how things are carried on into the future. So 90% of the victim survivors were partners of, or ex-partners of the POVs, and there were 10% of them were family members. We have a very large cohort of First Nations clients. If you just looked at the Australian-born clients, it was 90% of participants. So that's quite a lot, and a very large cohort of culturally and linguistically diverse clients as well, with a very large portion of them identifying India as a country of birth. Okay, let's just see. So because we might perceive alcohol and other drugs as if it's unchecked or if it's dependent use and they need a referral for treatment, those clients are obviously excluded from this analysis because it was lower level alcohol use that found its way into the program. So same with mental health and obviously key reasons for referral out. So the MED program results were collected at sessions 9 and 10, and we found some significant increases in motivation to change from baseline to MED group. There was also significant reductions reported in symptoms of anxiety and depression on the PsychTech self-reporting questionnaire, and significant reductions in symptoms of depression on the DASH depression subscale. We also found highly significant reductions in stress on the DASH stress scale. Men reported significant increases in affirming communications and significant reductions in inflammatory communications. So that was important to them, and men reported highly significant reductions in their use of psychological and physical abuse. But that is self-report of that, and that, is sometimes questionable. So post-group, the individual extras review data collection, there was still a significant increase in motivation to change, and a significant decrease in reported stress on the depression, anxiety, and stress scale. Decrease in inflammatory communications, and men also reported significant decreases in their physical and psychological use of abuse. So alcohol and drug use did not achieve significant, but there was a bit of a trend in reduction in cocaine use at that point. For the victim survivor report, we had 107 victim survivors contacted during the 23-24 financial year, and then to March 25. So Victim Survivor Advocate is currently supporting 65 victim survivors as at the 31st of March. Victim survivor reports have changed. There were 12, this is 18%, who reported specific behaviors that had improved since the person using violence had attended the program. So stating things like his behavior towards me had been improving. He hasn't been raising his voice or calling me names or making threats. And she felt like she was more able to talk to him about things without him getting angry. And notice when he starts to get angry, he will recognize it and calm down, own it, and apologize. So really specific feedback about change. And, another woman refers to
Anna.
him taking time. Yeah.
Anna, I'm so sorry.
2 minutes. Okay. That's all right. Are you?
We're losing a few people just because they have to jump offline as the sort of time allocated in their calendars. I'm guessing. Perhaps we could share your slides.
Oh, you totally can. Yeah,
if
of
people
course.
wanted to have questions, maybe they could contact you directly. I'm so sorry.
Oh God, that's okay. That's okay. And
Sorry, I'm just reading the chat box as well and to and fro. I might send through, yeah, some people having to jump out. So there's a couple of questions in the chat box, but what I might do is just pop through an email to yourself, Anna, and get those slides, and we'll distribute to the attendees today, and then have contact details as well for anyone to follow up further with yourself for anything else that they've got questions about. Is that okay?
That is absolutely fine, of course. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of detail here around the feedback as well. You can just read through.
Yeah.
And so that's
well, you probably
that's
can't
all
see
good.
the chat box because you're sharing screen, but there's lots of positive feedback in here, and people are waiting for the slides. So they definitely
great.
do. They
I'll
do
stop
want to
sharing
know.
and rejoin you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Sorry.
much, Ella and Cameron and Anna, for your presentations today. In the interest of time, I think we'll just wrap it up. Yeah, we'll definitely be having more webinars over the course of this year. There'll probably be another one in 2 months' time, roughly from here, but we'll definitely update on our LinkedIn page as well as through all the internal communications within Anglicare as well. But yeah, once again, thank you guys so much for sharing your presentations with us today.
Thank
Sarah, do
you.
you want to add anything?
See you later.
Thank you. Thank you.